And once again, we're going to be talking about Turdz winning a chat tournament. This is How Turdz Won Chat Tournament 28. I'm going to do something I hope I don't do very often. I feel kind of bad about doing this, but I'm actually going to skip the first round. And the reason for that is while I can get the solver to cover certain rule sets, in this case, same plus wall but no plus, the version I prefer looking at for some stuff on my end looks a lot worse and is more of a pain to use, less responsive if we do obscure rule sets. So I'll say that in the first round, Turdz played Yevon, and he had second turn the first three games, and they tied all of them. Then he had first turn, they tied again. Second turn, actually let's count. Yeah, first turn, second turn, they tied again. And then a fifth second turn, the sixth game of the match, Turdz eventually broke through against Yevon. But obviously a very competitive first round match, and a lot of the matches in the first round went a whole bunch of games. Without plus, it is hard to create sufficient advantage. I believe this is the round where Piggyman Akiyama set the record. In the first round, they had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 ties before Akiyama eventually won. So, very exhausting rule set, and I think maybe we're all better off for not looking at it. So in round 2, Turdz in fact got Akiyama, so we're now going to be looking at Turdz's match with Akiyama in the second round. And before you think, well, maybe there won't be many games this video, we will have more games this video than we did the last video of Turdz winning. So Turdz begins in 8. And this is a pretty conventional 8 defensive side starter, supported by the A6-3-6. Note, there is not necessarily coverage of Akiyama's play. This is not an aggressive side starter. You know, there's not coverage of moves like this, or potentially somewhere with the 8-5-9-5, right? This is looking to build out safety oneself, not deny safety to the opponent. And Akiyama plays a very interesting move. I'm a big fan historically of the meeting a side with a side response. It won me one of my favorite matches I've ever won. But the sort of idea is to create an L, but control how it occurs. So if Turdz takes the obvious square, Akiyama can now play in 9 after Turdz played in 7. Be the one responding and grab these 2 safe cards, while having a threat in 5 with 7-1-7 and a recapture in 1 with A8-5-4. So this intuitively, given that Turdz does not share 5, looks like a quite strong move. Now we've seen Turdz in the past. I think in the last video, I think this was from a Turdz game. I'm going to get confused because I'm recording all these pretty close together. But I think it was a Turdz game where there was a situation like this, and Turdz, knowing he had a card for 7 and 9, occupied 1, right? Got rid of the kind of worst square, waited for 7 to be occupied, and only then took 9, and that way got to achieve their classic pairing of their starter and the recapturer. And here he does something similar. Again, he says, okay, if I take 7, you take 9, and this doesn't look very appealing to me. The solver, in fact, thinks this is lost for Turdz. So this was a really nice move from Akiyama, that he can't play the completely conventional move in 7 and survive, that it is lost on the spot is very dangerous. Really nice move in 4. Instead, gets rid of the square that his opponent is dangerous on and occupies 5 himself. So Turdz plays 8-8-2-9 and 5, making sure, importantly, that the card in 5 does not set Akiyama up to control 9. Right? It does not give Akiyama a plus in 6 if Turdz is to play a 9 himself. So I think this is quite a good move, and Akiyama too decides to avoid jumping in these paired squares and instead grab safety in 1. And again, this seems like a good move to me. We're sort of playing a game of chicken with 7 and 9 and trying to find valuable things to do elsewhere on the board while those squares stay open. Now, Turdz makes a very interesting move. Turdz goes in 6, which is certainly not the first square I'd think of going, but I think this works because I think you still fundamentally have the pair. a6, 3-6 was the natural card in 7, but it's not needed because it's never going to be recapturing the card in 4, or very rarely. The only way it could is if this combo happened, right, and 4 is flipped via combo, but 3a, 5-8 is in fact a sufficient recapturer, also flipping via combo. And if this happened, Turdz would win. And 3a, 5-8 also is a nice plus in 6, so if Akiyama, I guess Akiyama doesn't have a plus in 7, but were he to have it, Turdz might have tools back using 9 through 6, which might hit something, valuable in 3. Quite creative game from both of them. You really, usually in these positions you see people just occupy the kind of the free square. And I guess there are ways to do it that are or aren't losing. This way, apparently now there are ties. For instance, here, apparently ties. But this one loses on the spot, right? You have this thing where these 7 and 9 squares are really valuable, and whoever occupies them second gets to get the card in 8. And so they both find interesting ways to maintain that pressure. Turdz gets rid of a square that Akiyama has, he doesn't. Akiyama grabs safety while leaving 7 and 9 open. Turdz makes the 7-9 pairing even more valuable. Akiyama still doesn't take it, just grabs the card in 5. Turdz captures from 3. Now Akiyama plays 9, and we end up having a tie. But really interesting dance around the squares in 7 and 9. And I think, I think there's probably, for instance, if Akiyama gets to capture happy, Turdz actually is a brilliant setup. That's a really cool move. I was thinking, what happens if we just follow out the combo chain? But I think it, you could see some chain like this happening. That's pretty funny. And ending up with Akiyama's win. I'm not saying those were correct moves all the way. I was just taking combos at every turn. But the solver points out a brilliant move here. This, where now 6, 6, 7, 7 has both 1 and 9, and one of those squares will prove winning. It's a really nice idea. Oh, I should say, this rule set is plus plus wall. There's no same and no same wall, which is why 6 didn't flip anything, and you might have expected it to. I really should have said that in advance. Sorry. I don't always remember to say the rules. So there were definitely ways for both players to go wrong in this game of chicken, and in fact, they both delayed as long as they possibly could, and ended up tying, I think, a very interesting first game here. Game 2, Turdz has second turn, so we won't be focusing too much on the first move, but Akiyama plays in 1, and clearly has the recapture in 4. So Turdz has a really nice way to lock in if there wasn't for that recapture. So my instinct would be look to set up something in 4. Turdz instead, partially because there might just not be appealing setups, the only real setup all that available is here, which has some benefits because it's hard for Akiyama to ever occupy 4, and I think you have a real threat to go in 4 yourself. So this might have been a promising approach. The solver is telling me this is okay, but no pressure at all. Easy for Akiyama to handle. Okay. Turdz just gets rid of 4. Says, this is kind of often a strategy in closed of you stuck a high number out and a low number out. I can't deal with the high number, but can you lock in the low number? And, if we look through these cards, okay, sure, there's no combo against this one. And there's no combo against that one. So, okay, there might not be combos here. This one, I guess, does allow a combo. And this one does lock in. But it often can pose an interesting question of how are you really intending to lock in your card? Akiyama locks in 2. Which does set up in 5. So I guess actually Turdz's main idea is when you lock in kind of this way, the permanent lock-in, you didn't really control 5, and I can play here and build out double safety and build out an L. Turdz has a good eye for these Ls. It's a very L-focused player. So Akiyama plays in 2 in a way that creates a threat in 5. And this looks really dangerous because your natural setup, I assume, loses on the spot. This looks really unappealing. And so what can you do? The second instinct is to try to grab safety in 3, But this doesn't do it. There's a choice between lots of ways to attack. This also isn't safe, though I guess you have the combo back. But here, you know, are you that excited about playing this position? This is not a very good capture to have. This easily could be lost. Yeah, it is. So this looks like a really difficult position to me. Turdz goes in 6. Setting up that combo we noted with a 9 to the left. And if Akiyama blocks 5, Turdz has 3. Yeah, this looks like a good enough threat that there's a good chance to hold the game. For instance, if Akiyama occupies 3, Turdz can play 5 and should be in good shape here. This looks sound to me. If Akiyama occupies 5 here, you know, something like this, Turdz at least has locked in an extra card. Now, this actually still... No, I guess there's here. Yeah, this is an interesting idea. Interesting concept. I do wonder if there's like weird sweeper setups. Like I'm just noting that 7A71 can have a weird plus and 9 if 7884 lands an 8. But I'm not sure. Alright, let's have the solver tell me this. The solver says there is a win here. That Turdz' defense, which looks pretty reasonable to me, doesn't quite hold. Now, I didn't find it, so I don't blame Akiyama here for not finding it. He ends up blocking 5. Turdz plays in 3. He plays in 7. Indeed, 7A71 does have the funny combo set up here, but Turdz has the 1 tie in 8. There is a win here. I did see what the solver said, so I'm not going to be pretending to find it. The win is 5, but with a different card. Now, why would this suddenly win? Right? Because something like this doesn't win. So I guess 7686 has to be the sweeper. So it has to be here. And with the 7 down, 7686 covers that 8 to the right. Yeah, that does make sense. Okay. So there was a missed win in this game, but this position is clearly incredibly difficult. And playing a move that it's quite difficult to find the win here is, I think, a really strong defensive try. I think this just looks incredibly difficult to me, and this looks like a move that's going to tie most of the time. So I think this is actually a really nice defense here, and earned forcing a block of 5 and leading to an eventual tie from a very tough position. Yeah, really unpleasant position. I wonder if A3, 9, 4, and 5 works. I was kind of hoping this... No, that obviously doesn't hold. This looks terrible. Yeah, this doesn't work at all. Okay. Yeah. Now this looks horrible. Let's... I'm just curious what the ties are, if there are any. So there are 2 ties here. That's not one of them. This is a tie? Okay, that's really difficult to find specifically. And actually, Turdz came incredibly close to finding the tie. Very similar idea here. Setting up a similar plus in 5, but presumably happening not to walk into some weird plus at the end like the last game. Right? Because the reason this loses is very specifically because this happens to be plussed at the end, right? And so you really have to see something very exact from a distance and a weird variation to see the difference between this and presumably what happens if we start this way. For instance, if we put a similar line here. Now here we have a second choice of a way to capture, but critically we have a plus wall here if needed. So they probably have to block, they probably can't block the 7a7 one now. Yeah. And you're just barely sneaking it here. Very tricky to get one right. Actually, remarkable Turdz found an idea so close to the correct one. This is a very strong move to survive game 2 against a very strong opponent. It really is remarkable as I check games with the solver that even between fantastic players, and Turdz and Akiyama are very easily two of the best players on the site, just how hard it is to string games together against other strong players without something being missed at some point. But I think this is an example of like what you miss at a really high level, right? Where there's just incredibly few defensive ideas, and Turdz basically finds the only real defensive idea, but there's some exact weird number setup that could be found that disproves this version. Just very specific stuff, but stuff where the players really do get the key concepts of the position, do find the key plans, right? Turdz is basically just dying on the top row and finds the one kind of idea in 6 that can compete for any ground taken there. Really interesting game, that one. So this one, Akiyama's going to start in 1. Now remember, there's no same, not super relevant, but Turdz has some up problems. Also no same wall. That is quite relevant because it means 7-7-2A does not have a good lock-in. But Turdz does have a capture in 2, but that's plus walled back. This is a pretty hard starter to approach, and Turdz has quite a bad hand going up. So note something like this. Terrible move because same is not on, so neither the same in 2 nor the same in 4 would be in effect. This looks to me like another really tough position to play. And I think Turdz does a very reasonable decision against a difficult corner to meet, which is just play something in the far corner. In fact, I made a video earlier about a match Turdz played against Akiyama where I thought he defended fantastically, and that might be what we're seeing again today. Turdz goes in 9. Now, presumably I would have guessed Akiyama would start building out from his starter, playing moves around it to help lock it in, but Akiyama instead goes for setups. So this removes his combo back if Turdz captures in 2. I would be thinking about going in 2 if I was Turdz. I'd be thinking about flipping stuff. I would ask, what's your intended return? Turdz, however, grabs safety, and this makes actually more sense given that Akiyama's hand is now relatively weak to the right. So Turdz grabs safety, and not only is this move better than mine, Akiyama now only has 2 ties. Akiyama plays in 2, which is in fact one of the ties. Now pressure kind of back on Turdz because Turdz doesn't have ups, or has minimal ups, and often the ups are, very susceptible to combo. So I guess in this position that might not be the move. How would this go best? I guess you'd do it this way, wouldn't you? Yeah. And then you have a much better up-down sweeper. And this similarly is going to walk into huge combos. So it's really hard for you to attack anything, and Turdz has to be careful to find a tie. He plays in 5. Akiyama plays in 4. And the solver has no complaints at all about this game. Thinks it was really well played. But again, I want to suggest this is a pretty hard defense for Turdz against this starter that he really has no play against. He does not want the game facing up. His hand has what looks like a lot of synergy, but without potential synergies throughout the game, but without same and same wall on. This is actually pretty brutal to play. And again, a really impressive hold from a tough random. And so we find ourselves in game 4. Yeah, game 4. I think my favorite games were the first two. I think the second one, really interesting, complex defense. And the first one, I just really liked the dancing around the paired squares of 7 and 9. I always enjoy paired squares. Here, Turdz gets his second first turn and goes with a pretty strong corner. With kind of, again, clear sort of L setup aspirations. If there's any capture, I assume either this or this is the intended big setup with the two ways facing out. Notably, Turdz also is the one who has a capture in 2 if needed, but I think that would be much less desirable. Though, I guess there's coverage of cards here. So, could go either way on a capture, but the point is he'll have really good play against captures. Akiyama sets up in 5. But this isn't the scariest thing for us, I don't think. Did I just lose sound? No, I didn't. Good. Okay. This isn't the scariest thing, because Turdz does have recaptures, right? It's not a huge setup when we don't have recaptures. And while there is a plus in 4, so we have to be careful about 5A29 landing in 4 and comboing us a heart at some point, I think we should be able to play around this comfortably enough. Though actually, we don't have a card we're really excited to block 4 with, so I now am starting to think this may again be a little bit dangerous. Turdz goes in 8, using up the recapture in 2, but importantly, for Turdz to need to go in 2, Akiyama has to go in 4. And anything Akiyama could put in 4, Turdz is really happy to play at 7, lock in 4, and will have locked in more cards than Akiyama locks in by going in 2. Also, 8199 looks like it's going to be a very powerful sweeper in any endgame here. Looks just like a tremendously powerful card here. Akiyama goes in 6? What an obscure square. Is it sound? It is sound. Alright, we got geniuses here. I guess the combo back through 5 is just going to be really powerful. Now for your Turdz, I feel like we're going to go 9 here. No, we don't make normal moves. I would be thinking, okay, stick something in 9, right? How bad can this be? And the answer is, it is losing. Amusingly, I can't take that without being weak to a plus and 4. So I have to do something like this, and then, yeah, I do lose. My 8199 didn't sweep well enough. Okay, interesting move. Creative idea. Isn't it hard not to think we should just go in 9? Alright, I'm going to try one more move in 9. Does this lose? Okay, this one doesn't lose. Alright, felt like this 9 can't be just losing. This one also doesn't lose. So I found the one move that loses. Go me. Or the one move in a very natural square that loses. But this is quite a creative idea. Not even just relying on leaving open all these combo squares. Because if we think about this, maybe this is sort of a Vialva type move, but if we think about this, Akiyama has combo play in 2, combo play in 4. If you want to leave those squares open, where do you play? Well, if you go in 3, that's often likely to induce 2. If you go in 7, that's likely to induce 4. If you go in 4, that already blocks 4. If you go in 2, that already blocks 2. If you go in 9, you very often get a response in 2. If you want to leave all your combo squares together, right, and make kind of guarantee Turdz doesn't block 2 or 4, what you want to do is create another square even more valuable or even more threatening. And so Akiyama combines playing something weak to 5, which means he will be able to flip it back easily because he has so much combo play through 5, while also creating this juicy square in 9 that can leave 2 and 4 open longer. So that's actually, yeah, just very interesting move. Not our player of focus, but note, Turdz does not go in 9. Turdz goes in 7. Not removing either 2 or 4 from the board, but grabbing safety. And Akiyama doesn't have necessarily a great card to put in 9 himself. For instance, if he wants to flip 8, he has to combo and use up the card that he really wanted to use in 2. And I guess this... doesn't tie, because, oh, Turdz also set up a plus in 4 and wins. Nice. Okay. So Turdz grabs safety while setting up combo potential of his own. And now, perhaps, Akiyama has to be a bit careful. Fun calculations here. And Akiyama goes in, like, the last square. He goes in 3. That's fun. So now, if Turdz wants to, capture, he gets comboed back really brutally. If Turdz takes his own potential sort of combo square, then we have a tie. And if Turdz occupies 9, each of his cards is only good for 1 square, right? 8199 is terrible in 4, but pretty good in 2. Not great, but pretty good, because comboing through 5 will do a lot. So very good. 944A is very good in 4, but not so good in 2. So he can't go in 9 because he'll be forced to go in the square he'd be worse in. So I guess it still just ties, because 7's safe. So actually, you can go in 9, right? Because if you walk into the combo, oops, sorry. That one, they block the other square. You walk into the combo, you still flip back enough to tie. And this one, they go this way, and you still flip back enough to tie. So I guess there are ties in 9. Where did Turdz go? No, good. Turdz went in a fun square. Turdz goes in 4, Akiyama combos, and Turdz ties. Man, going through it quickly did not do all the calculations necessary to understand this game. But what a fun sequence of 6 being met by 7 here. If you told me this position, and I had to figure out, just showed me like this setup, and asked me to figure out the move order that led here, I have no idea what I'd think. I'd know Akiyama has to have played in 6, his most recent move. And if I knew that, I'd probably guess that Turd's most recent move was in 8. I think I'd have a lot of trouble piecing this together. I mean, I'm having trouble piecing it together as is, and I've seen the moves. Another really interesting game, and if you're looking to do your own calculation rather than following along as I babble, this would be an interesting game to go back and just look for ideas, because I'm sure there's a lot of concepts. You sort of have this interesting thing of Turdz grabbing safety, using powerful cards, finding ways to make sure those powerful cards are potential sweepers in the endgame, and Akiyama sort of rolling the dice on having really good combo potential in a few squares. You sort of have combo dynamism and, like the move in 6, extending combo chains, versus, I wouldn't say at all conventional play from Turdz, but play that has an eye to which cards should be best in the endgame. How can I set them up to function well, but without them having perfect combo squares? And we move on to game 5 between these two titans playing a really interesting match. Akiyama again goes for a half weak, half strong corner. Again, it's supported by 49A4. But last time we saw Turdz see something like this, Turdz played a move kind of analogous to doing something like this. But here it looks like that type of move is pretty well covered, and Turdz goes for a different reaction. Does Turdz have a way to set up in 4? Obviously, Turdz has many captures in 2, and they're certainly not all comboed back. So is there a way to set up 4? Remember, there's no same. Not that A647 could be set up there anyway. So maybe this is a move that comes to mind. It doesn't look like anything to write home about, though. So Turdz goes in the far corner yet again when facing a starter he has difficulty directly approaching. He plays in the far corner, takes some distance from the action, plays a card. His hand is really awkward, right? 2689, 2789. These are very poor cards, especially in concert with each other. They're not terrible cards on their own, but having both in your hand is very redundant, limited power. 2698 and 2789. Gets a card out of his hand, and has a lot of combo play against Akiyama's captures, right? I talked about this earlier in the Vialva video with far corners, of just you really want it to create a comparable difficulty for your opponent that they created for you. And notably, there is significant combo back potential, that may be less so against this card because there's a plus weighting if we combo here. But having it in the air creates a real difficulty for the opponent, and this seems to me like a probably sufficient try to hold a tie against a starter you're not super happy about meeting. Akiyama goes in 4, not 2. Not looking to just block in from 2, but looking to instead play something where he has potentially combo play against anything Turdz can do. Now, can Turdz go in 2? This is the question. It looks dangerous, but I feel we can get away with it. The thing that's really scary is something like this or this, and I'm not sure we hold there. The solver says we do, so I guess this works, but this looks kind of scary to me. But I guess they have no ups, and that really helps. So okay, 2, you can find a tie in 2. Turdz went in 5, which is quite a creative approach. So I feel like the critical line has to be here, and the point is just to capture back. And at the end of the sequence, 6A, 4, 7, 4 is a pretty dead card. Obviously, you don't want to do it this way. Okay. This might work. Also have to be afraid of things in 2. Yeah, so Akiyama goes safely in 2. This does look very dangerous. We're up 6-4, but we can't attack anything. And they have threats everywhere. Ah, but no same. So this cannot be flipped. So this seems the way to do it. No same wall either, so this doesn't combo through 5. Yeah. Alright, so he was being very careful with the rules and more conscientious of it than I am. He goes here, and 4-9A4 is sufficient to sweep this and get the tie. Weirdly, it was actually Turdz that felt like he might be looking for something at the very end, though this looked quite dangerous. Alright, there were 2 ways to tie it. Turdz picked 1, and then Akiyama has a number of ways. Okay. Just felt, you know, like this kind of move should crush this move in 7. But there is no same. And we're going to be moving on to Game 6. Alright, Game 6. You might be asking, when is it going to end? This tournament was such a kind of notable tournament for just the incredible draw streaks. As we said, the Akiyama first round match against Piggyman was one of the longest matches. This match is 6 games deep, and this might not be the final game. You know, this was Turdz' first round match, which I didn't show, was 6 deep. This is one of the longest in number of games played chat tournaments we've seen. Turdz starts with a fairly weak corner. Now, my instinct seeing this hand would be Turdz would go here and pair it with the 1-8-9-8, but Akiyama has way too much up power and some ability to plus wall against 9s. So something like that doesn't really appeal. Alright, weak corner, easily recaptured. You worry that 4A3-8 or A4-8-5 won't find a home this game, and that he'll have to be pretty careful with it. Akiyama goes in 5, setting up a pretty huge threat of a plus in 4 with an A facing out. But not as scary captures in 8. So if I'm Turdz, I would strongly consider playing here. And Akiyama would have to be careful, but either of the captures in 8 do hold here. Hadn't thought this one would, but that's because I didn't look a move further. It was just like a combo. You know, I'm talking quickly. We're not calculating everything before we speak, or even very much. You know, we're just saying things off the top of the dome and seeing what it looks like. But the reason I was thinking 4 is not. I mean, I do like in corner center setups going in a neighboring square, but specifically, it just felt like it's really annoying if Akiyama goes in 4. So my instinct was just, I'm going to block 4 myself and hope it all works out. Because we don't really have a card we're that excited to put in 8. I guess 4A38 is fine in 8. Because if they've gone in 4, they've probably played A565 there. Alright, so maybe not so scary. But Turdz goes in 2 with 4A38. And now 4 seems kind of dangerous to me. Do we have a game plan against 4? The solver says, sure, go in 8. But 1 loses, and that makes this kind of dangerous position, right? If you have to find a move in 8, you're not guaranteed to, it's not trivial at a distance to see you're gonna survive something like this. 2698 is a threat. That feels really scary. So this is probably the more findable move in 8. Yeah, I guess this is fairly straightforward. Okay. Still seems tricky to me. Seems a little scary. Akiyama goes for 3 instead, which may well be a better try. I do note Turdz has this really nice card for 6. If he could set up this card really well in any other square, then that could hit hard, but it doesn't seem like he has it. Yeah, I was going to say my instinct is 1, and Turdz goes in 1. Just locking in 2. And leaving 6 open, right? Leaving 6 is a potentially good square for later. Akiyama does take 4. Turdz replies in 6. Nice, good timing for it. There's no combo back. And, okay. So this ties, but Akiyama picks the cuter tie with this, where the 5 can't overpower another 5. All right. Another well-played tie. Just popping the solver in some positions here, it looked like it didn't think there was anything incorrect done. So another very nicely played game. Again, this is a complex game to play. Yeah, I feel like I'm running out of steam on this video, and I'm sorry about that. I think my thoughts were perhaps more interesting on the early games, but that's going to happen as I record these videos, right? I record a bunch of videos in fairly quick succession. I'm going to lose some steam as I go, and I apologize to players that get covered later in this sequence. So I think after I record this one, I'll take a break from making this series for, a week or something, and then come back to it with renewed calculation enthusiasm. It's easier to have enthusiasm when looking at the actual board. I'm sure this is true for you, the viewer, as well, than this not as attractive version. I feel like we've seen these hands before, but we haven't. Okay, so I'm sure limited deck selection. Akiyama has first turn. He goes in 2. Classic pairing. The card in 2 pairs with the card 5/6 A6. And we have a standard defensive corner start. And Turdz does what Akiyama did in game 1. Oh, this is fun. You get some sandwiching, right? Where in the first game, Turdz played a defensive corner in 8, and Akiyama replied in 4, giving him 5, Turdz didn't have 5, and creating these paired squares of 7 and 9 that they both played chicken around. Turdz goes in 4, fittingly the same square and the same gap between a 10 and a 4 that we saw in that previous game, and also sets up paired squares, though they're not quite the same paired squares, right? Because if Akiyama goes in 1, Turdz does not necessarily have great play in 3. Yeah. Turdz doesn't really have play in 3. So I assume the plan, if Akiyama occupies this square, is one, exactly which card are you going to do it with, right? You probably don't want to do it a way that is susceptible to big combos. So say you put some card like this here, maybe Turdz' plan is to go here. And this becomes tricky because Turdz is relying on a lot of combo play here, but this is neat. It's hard for Akiyama to ever occupy 5 because Turdz has multiple ways to combo in 3. And so it is quite hard. So Akiyama kind of probably at some point is forced to play in a square like this. But it's tricky again, right? Because Turdz has this, but then Akiyama is here. And that doesn't look so great. So Turdz would have to be pretty careful here, actually. I think if you don't have 5, these positions are quite scary. This looks dangerous to me. Yeah, there's only one tie. And the only tie is this move, which would have taken me a while to calculate and find, so I'm glad I just asked the solver there. So this looks really dangerous to me. So maybe something like A8, 1-6 in 1 is promising. And solver says there are a bunch of things to do. You can also just play 3, right? You know, if you play 3 with like a 6 facing down, Akiyama only has one way to ever attack it. And it's not a very good way, is it? So maybe something like this looks much better for Turdz. Alright, the solver just told me I lost. Why did I lose? Ah, 5-6, A6. Weirdly great sweeper here. Okay, so that one exactly doesn't work. But I'm sure we can make some similar version work. Maybe here. Nope, that loses 2. 5-6, A6 just sweeps me in every line. Okay, we'll not calculate. We'll try one more move and hope I found one. Yes, we found a tie. The solver says there were 4 ties here, and I'm just not being very quick. But something like that, I guess, works. This looks dangerous to me, though. Like, as maybe is clear from the fact that I'm not seeing the lines all that quickly. This looks quite dangerous. Akiyama, however, goes maximum drama. Follows the previous idea of we're going to leave these squares open. You know, 5-6, A6 is great in 1 and 3, so we'll just leave that square. Just goes in 9. Just says, I'm not occupying any of these squares. If you want to occupy 1, you know, be my guest. Put something in 1. If I have any combo play ever against 4, you're in trouble. Now, I know it doesn't look like I will soon, but as cards land on the board, there's a chance I might, right? Because anything you put in 5, if I can combo play off that, that's going to go through 4. And also, I can just grab more safety. Now, this doesn't work. Just tell me why. Okay, apparently this wins for second turn. That's not so surprising. The 1 and the 2 down do not leave a great impression. So actually, what's the answer here? There's only one tie. The only tie is here. That's not a tie. Okay. I mean, I was like, wait, what? How does this tie if I just take? And the answer is no, it loses. So what was the only tie? I misread what it was telling me. The only tie is here, which makes a lot more sense given that there is a threat in 8, and when Turdz blocks 8, there's play elsewhere. Yeah. Okay. Very dangerous, complex position. Turdz does not go in 1, however, because we never play this simple. Turdz immediately attacks it in 8. Maximum chaos, and actually, remarkably good move because, okay, at this point, my brain's gone, so I'm just going to rely on the solver. There's a lot of options that look tempting here, right? We just looked at 9-8-4-2 and 1, and there was only one tie against it. I'm sure this is also really dangerous. There are 3 ties. This one, 3 ties. There's also ideas like grabbing safety here. 2 ties. I don't think you'd want to go in 5 immediately. That seems terrible. Yeah, that loses. But I think there's a whole bunch of appealing moves here. And Turdz, in fact, finds the only move here that wins by force. And I think this is pretty remarkable. And I guess, like, without being specific, this is an incredibly unusual position. I remember one of the first videos I made, I talked about a Turdz game against bots that had this structure, 2-4-9. I think it's the rarest setup you can see after 3 moves. I think it's the absolute rarest setup. The most common starter type is a corner. This is more likely to come out of a side starter. So this is very likely from the least common starter type. Maybe centers are less common, but centers come up so often in response to other things that you see it fairly regularly. But a side is least often met by an adjacent side. I think that's the least common response to sides. And then that is least likely to be met by the far corner. I think this is the absolute least likely position to get after three moves are made, and that makes it really unlikely for you to have any practice thinking about these positions. Getting practice looking for where the key moves might be in these positions. I'm drawn to 1. 1 is the only square that really screams, this is a good square to occupy. And 1 is probably the second best move. You know, something like this, there is only 1 tie. You must find this move to hold. That's pretty tough to find when everything else loses, including moves that look somewhat appealing, like this one, which is, you know, a move I had mentioned as I was tempted by. So I think 1 is a square to look. Maybe your second heuristic is kind of look for squares with 1 out-facing side. That often is going to be harder for them to take, so 3 or 7. But the win is not many of those squares. The win is in 8. And this is a weird one to play, right? Or it feels weird to me, right? It leaves a plus in the air. Now, if this plus happens, you have so much counterplay, right? Because actually, maybe the huge thing to notice, maybe what Turdz noticed that I haven't noticed, is his 4-9-4A has combo potential in 1 and 3. And there is not very much. There are a few cards, 1 in each hand, the A8-1-6 and the A2-6-8, that can land in 5 and not be weak to a combo through it. But actually, there is a tremendous amount of threat of a combo through it. And likely the only chance at counterplay is 7-7-2A and 1. But Turdz can just make sure he's the one who combos in 1, and Akiyama is left with 3. And so that makes 5 a very tricky square for Akiyama to occupy. And maybe 8 starts to really gain in value if 5 can't be used. Also, Akiyama has a serious down weakness growing. 7 is kind of a dead square for Akiyama, right? If it can't capture 8, that's pretty low value. 5 is a pretty dangerous square to ever play in. 6, you're using up your only card with any down power and your recapturer. You're losing a lot of potential power for the rest of the game. This is starting to make some sense, but a really hard move to find, I think. I think this is a remarkable win to find with 4 moves left in the game. And it is in fact just winning. Akiyama goes in 1. Now Turdz has 2 winning ideas. Can he find them? But to Akiyama's credit, he made it tricky. He's not losing to anything in 3. He's not losing to anything in 7, which are the first squares I would look. Turdz plays in 6. And again, he's creating dead squares. Akiyama has no play in 3. He has really surprisingly little play in 5. Again, this can be comboed back so hard. And so 5-6-A6. Yeah, the key for Turdz here, I think, is Akiyama wants to play 5-6-A6 and 5 at some point. That's going to flip the most cards. That's going to flip back 2 if needed. It's going to flip 4. It's going to flip 8. So he just needs 5-6-A6 to have another good square, right? If we imagine some move that gives that another good square, then on his second to last move, he'll just play 7-7-2A, and whatever square 5-6-A6 is dead, and 5-6-A6 will romp final turn. But here, we make sure the other squares are dead for 5-6-A6. Akiyama does just go for 5 immediately to lose in most dramatic fashion, and Turdz wins 9-1. Really nice game, really competitive match here, and Turdz finally advances. And luckily for our finals, the same rule will be coming back. So we will have a more conventional rule set for our finals against the other player that this series has really focused on so far besides Turdz. We have the return of Akiyama. And I think this is from the month where Akiyama came... These tournaments are from the month where Akiyama came second in my monthly power rankings. Had a phenomenal run here. And they're now facing once again. So it's going to take a second to load up. I continued talking while typing in the cards, but hopefully the typing wasn't too annoying. And we have our finals. And Villalba has first turn, and Villalba goes for a side starter. Again, has a pairing, 6-6-4-4, ready to recapture, classic defensive side. Now, how is Turdz met sides? Well, he just beat Akiyama with an adjacent side. We know that's in his range. I've also seen him play lots of far corners and lots of next to, so I don't really have an instinct here of what his plan is going to be. But once we see his move, I think it's pretty clear Turdz is going to set up an L, as he is very good at doing. I'm sure Villalba made this move quickly, because once you've played a defensive side, you're pretty locked into your next move, and there's not that much point in checking other stuff. Turdz actually has only 2 moves already that don't lose, so this is pretty solid build, but he plays one of them. And this is an interesting one, because my instinct would be try to do something that sets up a threat in 5. But this doesn't work. This is terrible. Because when they just capture in 5, you have no recapture in 1, right? You want to do something in 4 that sets up 5 while giving a recapture in 1. And does our hand have a way to do so? It doesn't. So this is really unpleasant. And maybe it was just a very good starter, because it's hard to find a move in 4. Something Turdz is better at than I am is I tend not to play into L's if I don't have a setup for 5. If I can't threaten 5, and we could see at a distance, this is not a sufficient threat against 5 because I have no play if they block 5, right? I want a threat against 5 and some reason to think my position is okay if they block 5. So if like this card was 1-4-4-7, I would have been like, oh, that's going to flip 4 back and that'll be safe to their hand. That should give me sufficient play here. Okay, I can go in 4, I can make a sufficient threat against 5, and if they block 5, I have a nice move then too. I am happy with this position. I am fully willing to play this L. I feel good about going into this L. However, Turdz now has to find an L where he does not have a threat in 5. And I think that's just, for me, that's tough to see at a distance. And I think he is better at identifying when L's are still worth going into, even if they don't meet the most obvious heuristics. And I will usually start looking somewhere else at that point. So I think this is something I'd like to get better at figuring out, is L's like this one, where I don't have a threat in 5 that's that obvious, but I do have sufficient play. And Turdz does have sufficient play here. Now, Akiyama does not have to block 5. He could play something in 1, for instance. This looks like a perfectly appealing move. But maybe it's not so bad. I think we don't want to go here, because I think we just lose on the spot, because they have the combo both ways. Now it turns out we don't lose on the spot because we can combo here, and that combo only flips back too. So okay, that's not so dangerous. So maybe this holds. No, it doesn't. Doesn't hold at all. They combo immediately. They don't wait to combo. They combo immediately because our combo back, sadly, gets comboed back in the end. All right, that makes sense. So okay, we don't want to play 7-5, 1-5, and 5. If we have to go in 5, we don't have to, but this should lose, right? And this, we're just walking into combos. I guess actually that holds. Huh. I guess this one holds. But that's scary to see at distance. That's scary to see because you're walking into this combo, you're walking into them just being able to sweep you places. I don't know. That seems like you can definitely find this at distance, but it's obviously this is scary and dangerous. You also have options to go in 2. But again, it's really scary to walk into combos. And you might see at a distance, oh, actually, I do survive here. Because I just have the double capture. But it's very scary to walk into this. And, oh, actually, yeah, they can do this more smartly, can't they? Yeah, they set up the combo both ways. Nice diagonal play. 7-5-4-2, a kind of surprising sweeper, but a sufficient one here. So yeah, this looks dangerous. I wonder which way Turdz was planning to hold this, because this isn't what happened. But in general, if there's not a big threat in 5, then 1 makes a lot of sense, because it doesn't quite force 5. There's options everywhere, but 5 is the most likely to hold, and if you have good control of 5, it's going to be hard for the opponent to figure out most of the time. Villalba goes in 3, grabbing close to safety. Because if Turdz does capture it, then there's this combo back. Does look like a tie though, right? Is this a tie? Am I missing something? No, I thought this was a tie. Okay. I mean, not that like getting a tie is a bad result for Akiyama here, right? This is not a winning position. But Curious Instinct. It does give up all left value though, and Turdz grab safety, right? Because it gave up all the threat against 4, and now there is no threat against 1. And this is how Turdz won. Turdz won by setting up an L, and Villalba ran out of leftward power. And Turdz has won a chat tournament after an incredibly exhausting game versus Akiyama. And then a position. This position really does have just 2 saves in the position, and one of them is this, which is quite difficult to find. You could say it's just like a recapturable strong corner, but it is hard, I think, to play so far away from the action. And be sure, like, you could be like, oh, of course this ties. Is it an of course? Feels like it doesn't tie, right? So, like, it doesn't tie in virtue of being a corner. There is some tie here, probably in 5. Yeah, there's 2 ties in 5. But the idea of being a strong corner here does not make this that you can recapture, does not make it a clearly functional move. And the L is not obvious either. One of the things on my recent work with win percentages for each player is, in a somewhat complicated position, simply finding a move that doesn't lose will give some winning chances. Like, that doesn't mean you should expect to win every game like this. You certainly shouldn't. I think Villalba played a good starter and has some advantage here. But there is just some chance your opponent will find some idea that happens not to work. And the more moves you can make that just don't lose, extend the game, there are just more winning chances than I thought there were in lots of positions where a player, I think, is worse, right? I think, like, Turdz has the worst position here, but that doesn't mean he has no winning chances. And he converts nicely and wins a 2nd chat tournament in a row, which is a pretty crazy feat, especially given that marathon match with Akiyama, where he was under absurd amounts of pressure most games, well, not most, but a fair chunk of them really had to find some defensive concepts. Yeah, so cool win by Turdz. I think his previous video made about him winning a chat tournament as just a really excellent defensive performance, I think was shown again here. I think faced a really tough opponent in Akiyama especially, but also difficult hands. And Vialva here also put a bunch of pressure on him with the starter here. And Turdz held out really nicely. And even another thing I think he did really well defensively especially was, I don't have the positions, but against starters that he was having trouble dealing with, he was good at calming the waters with something in the far corner, and it ended up usually not being that hard for him to reach a tie. And the position he really did get in trouble with was something where they could play like this, and he was so clearly behind on the board. He had a low ability to attack the opponent's cards. The opponent had more combo potential. And so we saw him in positions that were tricky but not out of control, playing a far corner and just playing kind of calmly from there. And in a position that was more drastically bad, the opponent was already getting way ahead and locked in cards. He couldn't lock in cards in reply. I think, again, this is nothing like the actual position, but I think he did really nice finding a reply in 6 that was technically losing, but in practice was almost certainly going to hold the tie. And sort of there's this principle in chess. You're defending, you have an advantage. You want to clarify the position. You have a winning advantage. You want to keep everything simple, right? You want to reduce variance. Or here's a maybe better way of saying, you're playing a much weaker player than you. If crazy things happen, then it could go against you, it could go for you. Anything could happen. And against a much weaker player, if anything could happen, you're going to lose more than you should, right? So you should try to avoid incredibly chaotic positions, because you're just not going to always keep them under control. You're going to do worse than you should. If you keep it relatively simple, or at least not that chaotic, you should, there are a lot of moves in a chess game, be able to outplay your opponent and get the win if you are a significantly better player. And by doing that, by keeping the game at least in somewhat calmer waters, you're likely to not risk anything, right? And conversely, if you're a big underdog, you want to seek out massive chaos, because that's really the only positions you can beat them, is positions where anything could possibly happen. And I sort of feel the same way about attack and defense. And I think this is a weakness of mine in defense in Triple Triad specifically, is when you're looking to attack or you have an advantage, if you can play the risk-free version, right? If you can play risk-free games against, with the attack, you can just keep pressuring and, right, eventually they'll break. On the defensive side, I'm saying this so badly, but on the defensive side, it's not that you should always look to complicate. But if you are lost or borderline lost, and normal things are likely to just keep you being lost or borderline lost, you want to find a way to make it really tricky. And often that's going to be an unconventional move, like the move in 6 here, that's going to be a high combo potential move. Maybe one other piece of evidence for this is Spade and Joker, the two bots, are very similar in strength. Very similar results. Have played almost the same number of games, have almost the same TTA rank, and have almost the same kind of difference between wins and losses. But noticeably, Spade has won a bunch more games and lost a bunch more games, and Joker has more ties, despite the fact that Joker plays a clearly more combo-heavy style. And I think it's easy to think of combos as a kind of setting up lots of combos as a way to play for a win. But in fact, I think it's often a better sort of defensive way to hold, right? It's a way to take positions that the opponent can just comfortably play for a win and create complications and make it much more likely to end up in the tie range rather than the winning range. So I think it's not a coincidence that some really good defenders, and when I've kept more detailed stats, Turdz is, I think of anyone I kept stats on, the player best at reaching losing positions but not losing. And in fact winning quite a few of those games. At reaching losing positions and not just not losing, but getting good results out of losing positions. Technically losing positions that he came to with enough complications that in practice they didn't look anything like the result. And I've seen enough of this from him that I don't think it's like luck or something like that. I think he has maybe the best talent of anyone around. This is weird to harp on when he just won a tournament and was only losing in one position and was dominating many of the other positions. But I think it's a really cool skill he has and one I'd like to work towards myself, of the lost positions he reaches are a lot less bad than the lost positions other people reach, and give him much better chances, not just to tie, but to win. The types of ways Turdz is lost are rarely that bad. And that's a really cool skill. Because we're all going to reach lost positions, right? There's sort of, how many winning chances can we create? How often do we convert those winning chances? How many times are we lost? And how often do we lose when lost? And if I look at myself as a player, I think I'm quite good at converting wins. I calculate them very well. I am quite good at creating winning chances. I am very good. Maybe my best skill is avoiding. I think my best skill is probably avoiding losing chances, but I don't defend very well when I'm lost. And there have been a number of games I've been really annoyed at myself with, where I had a difficult position, I played something losing, but then I found nothing at all to complicate after. I found nothing that was all that tricky. And checking back after, there were definitely tricky things I could have done in a number of games I lost. And that doesn't mean I wouldn't have lost, but I would have had a chance not to. And I didn't give myself chances not to. And there's so many things we could be focusing on Turd's games here, but it's something I've found really interesting in his games, is his lost positions just aren't as bad as my lost positions, or he handles them much better after they're lost. And that's a really interesting skill. Obviously, Turdz is great in all four categories, but I think that might be the one where he is the most standout, is he has the best feel for when to increase complications and when to reduce complications in a position, such that he is reliably increasing them and doing so effectively when in serious danger. Cool skill. And really impressive to win 2 chat tournaments in a row.